All right, in this video, we are going to be talking about the global scope. So you guys know this whole section is about scoping, but I haven't really talked about what a scope is. Put simply, a scope is where your variables live in memory, and that's what we're going to be discussing. And as far as where variables live in memory, the first area that we are going to be putting our variables in memory, our data, our references, all that fun stuff, is what's called the global scope. And this video is going to define what the global scope is and why it's awful and you should avoid it. Now, I'm going to go ahead and write another example. I'll go ahead and comment this code out and then copy this header and jump down here and do example 2. I want to quickly point out that this example is not quite going to apply to strict mode. So if you know what strict mode is, just don't use that. If you don't know what strict mode is, it's okay. We'll talk about that later. Okay, so example 2. Let's go ahead and do something that, this is an example that you'll see in a lot of JavaScript interview questions. And actually, I was on the JavaScript subreddit the other day where this person was asking about this, and I found it as a great example to describe why the global scope is bad and how it behaves and some of the potential pitfalls you can run into. So I'm going to start off by creating var a equals, 42, and then var b equals, 57, just random numbers. And then I'm going to write a function called example2. I'm going to say var a equals b equals 10. Now I'm going to say example2. Okay, so you'll notice I'm not outputting anything. Again, these examples are going to be very academic, but I want you guys to look at this code and kind of ask yourselves, what are the values of a and b after we invoke this example2 function? So we define these two variables. We call the function. The function declares the a and b and sets them to 10. So just think for a second what the output is going to be. I'll write the code that'll print out the output. In fact, I'll do it before and after. So we'll do console log a equals plus a, and then we'll do console log b equals plus b. Actually, for this example, I'm just going to pass in multiple parameters here. And then I'll write a separator, console log separator, and then I'll simply copy and paste this below. So we'll be able to see the output, or what a is and b is before the function, what a and b is after the function. So let's go ahead and hit Control S. And what we see there is kind of interesting. And again, this is a very basic JavaScript interview question. And what the point of this interview question is going to be kind of understanding where our variables are, where they live, and how they get modified. So we see over here on the left-hand side, a started as 42 and b started as 57, like we see up here. But then we see that a is 42 still after the function call, but now b is 10. So why is that? You might already see the issue here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite this example2 function to make it a little bit more clear what's going on here. So var example2, and I'll call this clear. Now I'm going to rewrite this expression to how the JavaScript compiler is going to see this. It'll be var a equals 10, and that's going to be b equals 10. And that's actually how the JavaScript compiler is going to run this code. And now it should be a little bit more clear what's going on. We might starting to understand here that when we have this var a declaration, this variable declaration, it looks like we're creating a new piece of memory somewhere. But when we don't do that to b, when we don't have the var keyword next to b, it's going to be accessing the b variable in the scope above it, which in this case is the global scope. So that is what's happening in this example. So you should start to get an or kind of a concept here that the variable, the var keyword, is incredibly important. And so with that out of the way, I want to write another example that really demonstrates the lack of the var variable and what happens when we might forget that var keyword, and a very common instance of bugs in JavaScript, and another example of why the global scope is bad. Again, we'll talk more about exactly what scopes are. I'm just trying to build up a little bit of maybe some things that you've seen before, some either interview questions or what have you. So for example 3, I'll go ahead and write example3 underscore other function. And I'm going to write this kind kind of as a silly example. It's not going to be very interesting. Just we'll do a for var or not var for I equals 0, I smaller than 10, I plus plus, and then I'm just simply going to say I'll just do something in this loop to prove that it's running. So I'll say I times 30 equals, and then I'll do plus, and then in parentheses I'll do I times 30. Now you'll notice immediately that we're lacking the var keyword, but so you might see where I'm going with this already, but we will see another thing. So example 3, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say we're going to reuse the I variable. So we're going to use I equals 1, j equals 1, and then for some reason we're going to call example 3 other functions. So some example 3 other function in this example, the contents of it are relevant. It's just we're branching off and we're going and we're doing another thing. And then I'm going to say something like console log 1 plus 1 equals, and then I'll do a concatenation and do I plus j. So now what I'm going to go ahead and do is straight up call example 3. If I say this out, we'll see that that our example 3 other function does indeed work as intended, but then at the end of it we get 1 plus 1 equals 11, and that's not because of string concatenation here. Maybe to make that example more clear, I can do maybe 1 to 5 here, and we see 1 plus 1 is 6, right? So that's obviously not is not the correct answer to 1 plus 1 unless there's something seriously going wrong with your JavaScript engine. So we see here that that I'm not using the var keyword, and you might have already heard to use the var keyword for your local variables, but it might not be so clear why. And the purpose of this example is trivial. You might completely understand what's going on here, but is to point out that by not using the var keyword, what we're in effect doing is we are attaching our variables to the global scope, and they're shared. So see, if I had done this 1 plus 1 equals before calling example 3 other function, you'll notice that I get the correct answer, but after calling other function, we get the same answer. So the question that you should always be aware of is, where are your variables? Where do they live in memory? Where does that data, where does that chunk of data exist in your JavaScript virtual machine? And because we're not using the var keyword, the answer to that is the global scope. So in fact, after running example 3, I can say console log I, hit Control S, and what we're going to get is 5. Right? And we get 5 because the I variable up here is not local to this function. It's being attached to the global scope. So it's affecting any other piece of code that references that global scope. Now, what is that global scope? What variable is that? Well, the answer to that is window. So you can kind of think wherever you do not have a var inside of a function, you are basically attaching it to the window object. So I can say console log window.I, hit Control S, and you'll notice down here we get 5 again. So that I variable is being attached to the window object. The window object is a very special object when working in on JavaScript that runs in the browser. And if you're working in JavaScript that runs in in Node, it would be the global variable. And what that is that's your global context. It's a chunk of memory, and anytime you define a variable without var instead of a function, what you're going to get is a new variable attached to window. So the point is don't do this, because this window.I, it's global to everything. It's global to even other files, other JavaScript files. And I can prove that by coming over here into my console window in my developer tools, and I can literally just type out window.I. In fact, I can also do window.j if I wanted to, and I'll get that variable, where these variables should not be attached to the window. And you might have known about this behavior, but I really want to stress the fact that when we do not use the var keyword inside of a local function, or a function at all, what we're getting is that memory is being attached to our global object, and that global object, what it is, depends on our environment. In the browser, that's going to be the window object. So this is bad. Cluttering up your global scope is bad. When we attach our data to our global scope, it will mess with any other code that relies on that global scope. And we can see right here another the example where we get a unexpected result. Imagine that we didn't even know the example 3 other function. We didn't know what it was. imagine it was hidden. It was written by some other developer in some other department or something, or a piece of code that you downloaded off of NPM or something. And we immediately see that we have a maintainability issue because we don't have any guarantees or protections of what this other function is going to manipulate. So by relying on the global scope, you're doing a very, very, very bad thing. And so in the next video, what we're going to do is we're going to be talking about how do we create our own scopes? How do we use our own chunks of memory that don't rely on the global? And with that, we'll see you guys then.